so if you just took the California bar exam and you got your score report, let's say you didn't make it, sorry to hear. If you're wondering how to analyze your score report and figure out where to go from here, I have a few examples of score reports that we can go over. They generally cover different scenarios, so hopefully something resonates with you, your situation, and hopefully that'll help you get to the next step. And if you're wondering why I'm wearing pajamas, this is actually resort wear, so these are real clothes. I'm not just lounging around the house. So let's go over the first example. This person sent in his score report after not passing this round. Essays, he says, were his biggest weakness, and more time should be allocated to that the next time. But he is not sure how to approach the MBE without having to overwork like he did last time, apparently. So I want to set a framework for how to analyze your score report. And the very first step for that is actually to look at the performance test. And that's because a lot of bar takers, they will immediately jump to, these 5 essays. What went wrong here? We got a 55. I did pretty well on this one. But they're forgetting, and like they did probably during their prep, that the performance test is a massive, whopping 2 times worth of an essay. And because there's no memorization required, there's no pre-knowledge required, they think, oh, it's probably fine. I'm just gonna leave it be. They know it's coming. They know it's coming. They know it's there, but they get treated like my succulent on the windowsill. Very low maintenance, forgetting until like 2 weeks before the exam, and then they attempt a couple, and then, oh yeah, it's probably fine. And I know how annoying it is to sit through 90 minutes of this. It's a very long exercise. It used to be 3 hours, by the way, but 90 minutes is still a long time. And then you have to review it for another 90 minutes. That's like 3 hours total. And then you're like, oh, I want to eat, and you don't want to do the PTs anymore. So I get it. However, this is what happens. So this person got a 1382, which is 8 points away from passing. And that's unfortunate, because if he had gotten just 5 more points, even with this reread, if he had gotten a 55 here, and this turned into a 57 and a half, so that's 2.5 extra in raw score. 5 points raw score is about 20 scaled. And that's for a regular essay, one of these. For a PT, that's 40 on the written side. So that is at least an 8 times multiplier from the raw score to the scale score. And then of course you gotta average it with the MBE, giving you, so 40 points on the written is 20 points on the total or overall. So let's say he got 2.5 extra here. That is what? You times it by 4, because we gotta average it. 10. He would have passed if he had gotten a 55 here, or if he had gotten a 65 here. That is unfortunate, and that's typically because bar takers neglect the performance test until it's too late. They obsess over memorizing, understandably, memorizing for the MBE, for the essays, and then they just forget about the PT. They take it for granted. And you know what happens when you take something for granted? Nothing good ever happens from that. So for this person, this is a pretty straightforward answer. This person thinks the essays were the biggest weakness, and he's concerned about MBE. His MBE was good. It was over the passing range. So it's actually the PT that is holding him back the most. Not the essays, not the MBE. In fact, his MBE is just fine, and it's helping him boost his score a lot. 1330, 1435, average that, you get 1382. Yes, he could have gotten the, like 1 or 2 extra MBE questions. Yes, he could have gotten a 65 on this and he would have passed. And yes, maybe if he had gotten a 70 here, he would have passed. I mean, there are many variables, but the lowest hanging fruit is the PT. Is in fact the most overlooked way to raise your score. It is so overlooked. People don't think about it. And again, I know it's a difficult exercise, annoying, difficult, long. And that's exactly why you should try to master it. No one else is doing it, and you're doing it. So if you get a 70 here, this is gonna be like a 1390. That's well above passing. He would have gotten, like 1405, maybe more. And because it's worth twice as much for 1.5 times the time period, 90 minutes versus 60 on these, it is highly concentrated source of points. And you're neglecting it? Why are you doing that? So for this person, he should stay in maintenance mode for the MBE. Whatever he was doing, he's doing just fine. And he no longer needs to overwork himself. Great. And he should prioritize the performance test. And I'm going to sound like a broken record because I just cannot overstate the importance of PT, especially if you're neglecting it. And because there's no memorization required, there's no pre-knowledge required, and it's skill-based. Once you learn it, you're going to know how to do almost every other PT. Just do maybe like 8 to 10, and you're pretty much covered all the different formats, like client letters, closing arguments, objective memo, argumentative brief. Sometimes, maybe like 10% of the time, you'll see like a weird wills or whatever, summary judgment motion, stuff like that. But at its core, almost everything is either objective or subjective. So you just gotta, adjust the tone for that. Of course, there's like the client letter that's objective. And then for maybe some of these essays, likely this person needs to identify the issues more completely. I have no idea. I don't remember what his essays look like. But if you want to pick up more points on the essays, you want to identify more issues. It's not about writing a giant analysis, like this beautiful masterpiece. No, you want to at least identify all the issues, because an incomplete sketch is more preferable than a complete masterpiece. You answered the first call of the question. Beautiful. It's well argued. But you barely touched like the second call of the question. And so it's incomplete. The grader cannot give you points, even though he liked the first half. By the way, essay number 3, that's PR. That's important. He got a 65. Great. Keep it up. So bottom line, he should probably start with the PT. I actually have an interactive cheat sheet if you're looking to improve your score. In fact, maximize your PT score. I have some initial information, strategy, why you want to do this, how much is weighted, timing, basic approach, top mistakes you should avoid. So you can find this under the resources tab right here. It's free. Why don't we go to example number 2? Okay, this is example number 2. This one has a similar issue as the first one. You can tell right away that there is something going on here with the PT. And this candidate is actually someone I'm interested in just because we've had long conversations for his second attempt, which is this one. His first attempt, he got a 1201 on his first attempt. And then he got a 1341. He added 140 points between attempts, which is pretty remarkable. And he made really great progress on both the essays and the MBE. These were lower the first time. But unfortunately, he didn't quite make it this time. We were looking forward to him passing. And I'm actually going to write a case study. And this will be the first case study I do that talks about someone who didn't pass. I usually talk about passers because there are insights that we can glean from this person's experience, what he did right and what he could have done differently. And let me show you what he said. He sent in his reflections from his second attempt. So he says he often got scores of 65 plus on essays and 60 to 80 in the PT. I'm assuming maybe he got them graded. He also made use of AI. I think he used ChatGPT, and probably ChatGPT graded him based on some some rubric, some unknown rubric. I would not take stock in these exact numbers. If they're trending up, that's a good sign. If they're consistent, that's also good. But just because ChatGPT said this is an 80, you should not believe him completely. In any case, this made him think that he should be okay with the written portion. He did well on adaptive bar. He was scoring above 80%. He was getting a lot of questions right. And all these combined made him feel ready to pass the February exam, his second attempt. But he was a foreign trained lawyer. I think there was a bit of, he took the performance test for granted. Practicing attorneys tend to do better on the PT. But that is actually not the excuse to neglect the PT just because you had some work experience. You cannot rely completely on work experience. You still need to make sure that you can do these. Actually, on my first attempt, I made the same mistake. I thought the PT was fine. I thought it was doable. And then I got hit with very difficult performance exams, two exams, 3 hours each, because this used to be a 3-day exam. I think I got a 55 on both, even though I was pretty confident with the PT. So you can't just relax and rest on your laurels. Just because you're an attorney, even though you do have, the skills of writing and all that. And in fact, attorneys tend to be worse at the essays because they're writing like lawyers instead of writing like a bar taker. And they're better at the PTs because they're writing like a lawyer. But don't relax around the bar, okay? Don't relax. And even these 80% scores, practice scores on MBE, he still got a barely on track to pass score. So you can't rely on your practice exams only. You should assume that your performance will be 70% as good, 70% as good as your practice. That would be a good buffer zone that you want to have. Shoot for the stars and land on the moon, or the other way around, I don't know. So for this person, what should we do? So again, the PT is something that we want to focus on. This person has admittedly, I think, mentioned the PT. Let's see, he would have passed if he had followed my advice and finishing the PT first. But he has accepted the situation and he's going for July. And I'm rooting for him to pass. Going back to his scores, everything else looks pretty good actually. 65, 70, he got a 70 on the PR, and you can find his essay and the first examples essays here actually. So you can find this essay here, he got a 70. So this is something worth looking at. So that's good. He nailed the PR. I did suggest to him to prioritize the MBE, the professional responsibility essay, and the PT, which is actually called the tripod approach. You can find that on my blog, because that will cover at least 70% of your score. The MBE obviously covers the MBE, and on the California bar exam and the UBE, at least half of your essays will test MBE subjects. On rare occasions, maybe 2 essays will test MBE, but in most cases, at least 3 essays are going to test MBE. So if you master the MBE, then that's carrying over to a lot of your essays as well. So nail the MBE, nail PR, and nail the PT. That should get you almost all the way to a passing range. And you can afford to miss a few issues. Maybe you forgot a couple of rules. Everyone else is just freaking out over predictions. Oh, is evidence going to be tested this time? Who cares? We know that the PT is going to appear. We know this already. We know it's worth twice as much as an essay. We know these MBE questions are going to appear. And we actually know the exact breakdown of how many questions are going to test negligence, 12 to 13, hint, hint. Half of these, so again, 12 to 13 will be Crim Pro. What else? There's another highly tested area. So up to 36 questions out of 200, or I guess 175, the tested ones, are going to come from negligence, going to come from criminal procedure, and I believe also individual rights. So that's another 12, 13. So even within this known portion of the exam, we can narrow down on these big areas, nail the MBE, nail the PER, nail the PT. He's good. I think he would have passed if he had gotten a 70, even a 60. So that's like another 10 points here. If he had gotten if he had gotten 15 points, that is 60 extra skill points, or even 12.5 times 4. That's 50. That's 1390. I mean, this is a low-hanging fruit right here. It's easy to improve on because it's skill-based. No memorization required, again, which is exactly the reason people neglect it, because they don't think they need to practice for it. But it is still skill-based, but once you learn it, you're good. Okay. Yes, so for this person, it's the PT. I would suggest taking a look at the cheat sheet to start, and then keep everything up. Like whatever he did here is good. Maintain the PR. He did a good job here. And then don't rely on your prior work experience, and he should be good. Now let's move on to the third example, and I'll try not to blab on about the PT this time. So this is the third example, third score sheet, and this person had sort of the opposite problem of the first two. So we can see right away, let's go through the framework, check the PT, good. This person has done well with the performance test. So let's now compare the written versus the MBE. See which one is stronger, which one is weaker. In this case, the MBE seems to be holding this person back. This person did quite well with the written. This is within passing range. PT was good. PR essay was also good. I got a 65, which is good. This is important. Important. Other essays are relatively on track to passing. This one is a little bit, but in general, it's good with some variations. So it's actually, in this case, the path is relatively straightforward. For the next round, I would focus heavily on the MBE with maintenance on the PT and the essays. Of course, there's room to go a little bit higher. Like for this one, this could be a solid 70, and that would be good. We know, again, PR is going to appear. Maintain this, good. And then when she's doing the MBE, I would have this goal in mind, which is to get every question right 100% of the time. I know that's not realistic, but that's kind of the mindset you want to have. So that, again, you want to shoot for the moon and land among the stars. Did I get it right this time? She should redo the questions until she gets 100%. She should memorize the questions and answers if she has to, the answer explanations. She could even create new practice questions using AI. She could go as far as doing that. The goal here is to do this so repetitively so that she sees the patterns, because the MBE, and in fact the entire bar exam, is a closed universe. You cannot test more than what's testable. So the more you do these, the more you see the patterns. And the more you see the patterns, the more familiar they're going to be, and the more right you're going to get on those. And even if you don't get 100%, let's say you get 70% of the questions right on the actual MBE. So out of 200, you get 140 right. That's a very solid MBE raw amount correct. That should be that should be over 1400, I think. So that's why it's relatively simple. It's MBE, they're like short hypos. You can do them in 2 minutes or less, and then you can review them in 5 minutes each. So it's just repetition with the MBE. So it's not as overwhelming as you think. You see all these numbers, but then once you start comparing the numbers, you know how to tell which one's bigger numbers, right? This one is a smaller number, MBE, okay. And this is a good number, 1390. It's good, and she's actually quite close to passing. So I think if she got maybe like 10 more MBE questions, she would have passed, maybe even less. I want to say 3 scaled MBE is about 1 question. So 30, yeah, 10 questions. And that's very doable if she focuses on the MBE and just kind of maintain everything else here. She doesn't need to retake some class or course. She doesn't need to deep dive into outlines. She should be, as a baseline, practicing and reviewing. It's a cycle: practice, review, explanations, and then cross-reference with outlines. And if you really need to, as a remedial measure, you can add lectures. Like specifically if you're weak at evidence or weak at criminal procedure, then that would be a reason to maybe take a closer look at some of the materials that you have. But as a default, especially for retakers, they should be going straight to practice so that you know where to patch up your weaknesses. The point of practice is to measure your current performance, see where the holes are, and then on the back end where you review, you check the answers, you study the relevant rules. That's where the learning happens. That's why if you're allocating 30 questions a day, let's say, it's not just 1 hour, but you should be allocating at least 2 hours. 1 hour to do the practice questions, and then another hour, probably more, to review, cross-reference, and memorize. That's where the learning happens. So the time spent in outlines, lectures, passive stuff, less time here. Practice, more time here. Review, feedback, most time here. So let's draw this big arrow. Review, feedback, practice, passive. And this is especially true for repeaters. You don't want to do the same thing you did before and expect different results. Unless you're close to passing. Let's say she got a 1380. That's kind of a rounding error almost, right? So in that case, she probably knew what she was doing. She probably knows what she's doing here, actually. But the time to revisit lectures, take really good notes, that time has passed. Now is the time to grind the hell out of the MBE and master it, which will also, again, carry over to the essays. Here, here. So that's pretty straightforward for this person. Let's look at one more example. So this is example score report number 4. I found this one on the California Bar Exam subreddit, which I happen to be the admin of, so behave. This person took the exam twice. This person got a 1298 on their second attempt. The first attempt, 1268. One thing I'm noticing here is that this person made a very nice improvement on the scaled MBE. This person got a 1270. And on their second attempt, this person got a 1369, which is 99 points, almost 100 points improvement on just the MBE. So this person probably knows is whatever this person was doing for the MBE, that's been working. So I would keep that up. Let us look at the actual breakdown. This is popping out 45, 60, decent. Scale written versus scale MBE. We can see that there is a pretty big disparity here. 1228, that needs a little bit, not even just a little bit, that needs a lot of work to get to. We want to get to at least 1400, assuming this stays the same. In fact, maybe like 1420. But we can also improve this, 1390 or 1400. In which case we can just relax a little bit here. Seems like this person's strengths could be the MBE, so perhaps this person could go a little bit more deeper on the MBE, which is just as well because it's going to carry over to the essays anyway. So let's target 14, maybe 100, another 100 points is not realistic. Let's target 1410 here on the MBE, which gives a little bit buffer room for the written side. So 1410, so 1370 should get you to a 1390 overall. 1410, if you average that, 1390. Is that realistic? It's gonna require 150 more points. I think so. we can see from here that this person got a 45 on the PR, which is something that needs fixing. And some of these other essays are not quite there either, but the other ones are approaching the safe threshold of 60 to 65. From this, we know that we want to go extra hard on the PR. We need to get this to, I think the goal should be a 70, considering the other essays. And, that's doable. This person could start by looking at those other essays that have been submitted, like these good ones, 65, 70. This person should, at a minimum, look at these essays and compare it to their work. Compare their 45 to the 60, 65, 70, and try to mimic it, maybe even rewrite the answer to essay number 3. That would be a good start. And then I would be working on the PR so much after this. I would go back the past 10 years of PR questions, and I would solve and memorize those issue patterns. So that's at least 20 PR essays that you want to solve. Of course, you want to note the change in law that happened over time. The ethics rules have shifted in 2018, 2020-ish, 2015. They're having some changes. So it's a good exercise for you to kind of figure out if the stated law is actually accurate for today. So that's that. So master PR, bump up the PT a little bit. So you want to get at least a 65 or higher. 70 would be ideal. So I would strongly suggest prioritizing doing several more practice PTs to get there. 70 here, 70 here. So that's 25 extra points here, 20 extra points here, 45 raw points, times it by 4. What is that, like 200? No, 180. So that's 180 added to the written, which would translate to 90 on the overall score. So that already gets you to 1389, which is very close to 1390. Just by taking the PR here to 70, just by taking the PT to 70, this person would have passed. It just so happens to be that PR, this person got a 45, but that just kind of shows the importance of small tweaks. We can surgically target your weaknesses, and then even 100-point addition to your overall scale score is not a pipe dream. It's not overwhelming. You just got to target a few important areas. Surgically target your weaknesses, and then just go after it. As for the MBE, I would just continue to work on that. Whatever this person was doing to add 100 points to the scale score is working. But if that's not you, as a baseline, I would practice, review every day. And then if you're a repeater, you don't need to look at the lectures, outlines. You don't need to do all that pre-review up front. Do a little bit just to get familiar with the materials. But then after that, you should be going through that loop. Practice, feedback, just do this. Just spam this, and this will go up. Same thing with essays. Essays in particular, you want to be good at issue identification. I use the issue tracking technique. You can look that up. Yeah, nail those 3 areas, MBE, PT. The first 2 examples we saw how important the PT was. And then number 3, the PR. I would even say the PT is priority number 2. MBE is number 1. PT is number 2. PR is number 3. Number 4 would be the MBE essays. I don't know which one it is. And then number 5 would be the non-MBE essays, like trusts, business associations, wills, obviously not the PR, so like agency, corporations, wills and trust, community property. Those you can kind of deprioritize in favor of MBE, number 2 PT, PR, because these will already cover 70% of your score. And again, people are going to be wondering, oh, how do I memorize this one obscure rule about testators, C-Pray, and inter vivos, transfers? You can just kind of make something up, something that makes sense. I have a case study with someone named Doreen Benjamin. She passed California bar, she passed the New York bar with 1 week of prep. She She just did the tripod approach and she passed. So I would suggest maybe looking into that. And one last thing, let's see. Did we go over this? So this is the framework that I use. We did this for the first two examples. Check the PT scores. Did you neglect the PT? Then you gotta fix it. And this is the link to the cheat sheet. And then let's say you got weak essays. Let's say your essays are scoring between 50, 60, something like that. Maybe even the 45, maybe you're a 65 here and there. If they're varying, if there's a high variation, then it could be that you need to maybe brush up on that specific area of law. Whichever essay you got a 45, 50, 55 in, brush up a little bit more on that, especially if it's a MBE subject. And if they're consistently low, let's say you got 55 across the board, then it's more likely that you want to brush up on your IRAC, how to organize your IRAC, how to identify the issues, how to separate the rules, how to separate the application. You could have like a big, masterful essay. Your mom's so proud of it. She wants to put it on her refrigerator. But then that's only for like the first call of the question. Let's say you ran out of time. Second call of the question, you just kind of outline a little bit. I would say that is worse than having a complete sketch. You've identified all the issues, the sub-issues, defenses, exceptions. You've laid them all out, but maybe your analysis is not that the greatest. It's not the longest. You don't have counter arguments. You have a straightforward answer. That is better than an incomplete masterpiece. Again, a complete sketch is better than an incomplete masterpiece. So know how to identify the issues. Issues are king on the essays, especially PR, which is a racehorse essay, which requires you to spot the issues. You can take a look at this here. It's also under the resources. The last thing I wanted to point you to is this article about how important these 5-point increments are on the written side. So there are some examples here that kind of shows you what the difference is between failing and passing. So let's say you got a 1350 and you feel like, oh, you're so far away from passing. You're not. You're 10 points away from passing. So hopefully that elucidated some issues for your score reports. If you have more score reports you want to submit, or if you have especially essays that you want to contribute to this free essay answer bank, I would love to have your answers, whether they are high scoring or low scoring. This has been free since 2013, and you can go back the past 12, 13 years for your own self-learning. And if you could contribute to it, that would be great. So that is it. That's 4 examples. Maybe I'll do more if I see more, but for now, peace out. Hopefully you know what to do. I might have to lounge for real. Just kidding. I have a ton of work to do. See you later.